I want to check at the beginning if you can hear me. Just wave your hand if you can hear. All right, so the sound is on. And so I'd like to wish everyone good afternoon, good morning, good evening, whatever time of the day it is for you. And we will begin as usual by going for refuge and rousing bodhicitta. So please rouse a good motivation and think of the meaning and the words together as we recite the prayer for going for refuge. O sangye chedan tsoge chanam la chancho bardo dane chapsum che dagi chenyen gibe sunam gidrola penjer sanje drobar sho sangye chedang soge chonam la chancho bardo dane chapsum che dagi chenyen gibe sunam gi drola penjer zanje drobar sho sanje chedang soge chonam la chancho pardo dane kyabsum che dagi chenyen gibe sanam gi drola penjer sanje drobar sho until enlightenment I go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and the sublime Sangha. By the merit of my listening to the Dharma, may I reach Buddhahood to benefit me. Senjim damje dewa dan dewe judan dembra juje donga dan donga ji judan rawa juje donga mebe dewa tamba tamin rawa juje Yere chatan nidan rawe danyon chambola nebra jurje. May all sentient beings be happy and have the causes of happiness. May they be free of suffering, and the causes of suffering, may they never be parted from the highest joy, free of suffering. May they dwell in the great equanimity, free of attachment or hatred for those near or far. In the Dharma Expanse Palace of Akanishta is the essence of all Buddhas of the three times, who shows me directly my mind is Dharmakaya. I prostrate to the glorious exalted Guru. Please bless me and all sentient beings that our minds become the Dharma. Please bless us that the Dharma become the path. Please bless us that the path dispel confusion. Please bless us that confusion arise as wisdom. And now think to yourself that we must bring all of our mothers, all sentient beings with whom we have had intimate connections over many lifetimes, and with whom we are inextricably related in this lifetime. Think of their kindness to you and how we need to bring benefit to them. And so please listen with the motivation of bodhicitta. And the Dharma that we are listening to is the Treasury of Abhidharma by Vasubandhu, as explained by the 9th Karmapa Wangchuk Dorje. In the Treasury of Abhidharma, there are 8 chapters, and of the 8 chapters of the Treasury of Abhidharma, we are speaking about the 6th, the teaching on paths and individuals. And in this chapter on the paths and individuals, there are 3 main sections. There's the explanation of the paths, explanations of the individuals, and a specific explanation of paths. And so we are in the second, the explanation of individuals. And so this has 3 topics: the explaining the 4 pairs of individuals, the stream enterers, once returners, non-returners, and arhats, and how we have entering and abiding and result, the two for each of these. And so of these, we are speaking about the first of these, explaining the four pairs of individuals. And so this has three topics: explaining stream enterer, explaining those previously detached, and explaining successive results. So we are speaking about the successive results. The successive results, there are four topics: entering and abiding in stream enterer, entering and abiding in once returner, entering and abiding in non-returner, and entering and abiding in arhat. And so we're speaking about the section on entering and abiding in non-returner. And well, that has two parts too: entering and abiding in the result. So we are speaking about abiding in the result, and in this there are several different subsections, but we're talking about the one that is explaining the many classifications of non-returners, and there are four topics: classifying those bound for form as 9, explaining the holy wanderers, identifying nobles whose lives have been completely transformed, and methods for meditating on the alternation of the dhyanas. We're speaking about, we have come to the second today, which is on page 464 of the book, explaining the holy wanderers. But before we get into that, there was a question that came in over email this morning. And so to go through that question, there are actually two parts to the question. And the question reads, when you presented the 36 kernels in desire on the path of seeing, or actually it showed that there were only 4 left on the path of meditation, that is desire, anger, pride, and ignorance. But now we're talking about the 9 discards in the path of meditation. It explains the 3 sets of 3 as far as I understand it. Actually, it's even worse than that. You've got 9 sets of 9 on each level, so you've got 81. So how do the 4 presented earlier relate to these 9? How do you get from 4 to 81? How does that happen? In other words, what is the context of these 9 discards, and what are they in terms of our defilements? And this is a good question. I think I covered it briefly in our general topic, but I didn't really go into it in too much detail. And as I looked at this morning, it occurred to me that there's kind of an easy way to see this. So here we have our 9 discards of meditation for each of the 9 levels. 9, right? Well, actually here, as we know, they're greater and smaller, so they're different in scale. But actually, each of these, there are 9 sets of discards of meditation. So if you take a look at one set of discards of meditation, it's one set. So what that means is that there are 4 parts. There's desire, anger, delusion, and pride. Now, they're not necessarily, I don't know if they're equal parts or not. I just had to, kind of divide it so you can make it easier. But so you've got all these 4 things combined to make one set, right? So that's one set. Now, for each level, you have 9 9 such sets. So these 9 sets that are going from greater of greater to lesser of lesser mean that there are 9 different bundles of desire, anger, pride, and delusion in the desire realm, right? So it's 9 bundles. Now that's the desire realm, but you also have them in the form and formless realm. So there, in the form and formless realm, there is no anger, so it is 3: desire, pride, and delusion. Now, I thought about making another little graphic, but it was too hard to split a little coronavirus into 3 parts. My poor computer skills. I didn't want to spend more than 5 minutes on it, so I just didn't do it. But you get the idea, right? So you've got these different sets of discards, and each set of discard is a combination of all the different types of afflictions on that level. In other words, what we're really saying is that you've got different gradations of each of these types of afflictions. You've got really coarse anger and desire and so forth that's directed inwards. Those are all discards of seeing. You've got subtler desire, anger, pride, and delusion that are focused outward. Those are discards of meditation. But even among that, there are gradations just for those attached, for those who are still attached to desire. You've got 9 sets of these for desire. And so it's kind of like, more anger, more pride, more delusion, or greater anger. So you could say the greater pride, delusion, anger, and desire, greater, middling, greater, and so forth of each of these. But it's just too many words, so we say a set. So 9 sets of discards. So that is the first question. And then the second question is, well, we spoke about great Brahma yesterday. How do you avoid rebirth in great Brahma? Well, the simple answer is see the Four Noble Truths. If you follow the path and see the nature of the truths, then you will not be reborn in great Brahma. And you don't have to worry about it. In other words, you don't need to worry about it so much. Furthermore, in the Tibetan tradition, we don't practice the dhyanas, and especially in the Kagyu tradition, we kind of look at the dhyanas and the formless meditations as a bit of a trap. Because in the formless and the dhyana meditations, part of it is that you're withdrawing from the desire realm. You're withdrawing from the appearances of this life. And the whole point of our primary Mahamudra meditation in the Kagyu tradition is to become aware of the nature of our mind and the nature of the appearances, and not discard anything, not look at anything as good or bad. And so if we're primarily following the paths of the Kagyu tradition, and probably the other Tibetan traditions are similar, we don't really practice this. Okay. If you are on the Theravada path, there's a different way that you're doing. There may well be people who are listening to this who aren't practicing Tibetan Buddhism. So if you're on the Theravada path, then actually practicing the dhyanas is a really effective type of meditation. They're very powerful meditations. You have a lot of control over the mind in the dhyanas. And so if you want to do the contemplations of the 4 foundations of mindfulness, or of the repulsiveness meditation, or whatever else your teachers instruct you in doing, it's much easier to do them on the dhyanas. It was when the Buddha achieved enlightenment, he did it on the basis of the dhyanas. So the dhyanas, just because we don't necessarily practice them in the Tibetan tradition, doesn't mean that we should look down on them or see them bad. Actually, they're very good and very strong meditation. You just have to, it's kind of a different technique. So, but in terms of taking rebirth in great Brahma or in the other levels of other abodes of form, if we are in the Tibetan tradition and we're not practicing the dhyanas or the formless meditations, we are not going to be reborn in those realms unless we are doing Mahamudra meditation improperly. If you're doing Mahamudra meditation improperly and you're just dwelling in some sort of a blank state, thinking that I'm meditating on the nature of my mind, but you're actually just in a blank state, then you're in the danger of being reborn in the formless. So you have to make sure whichever type of the meditation you're doing, you're following the instructions and doing well according to your tradition, the tradition that you're in. All the traditions are excellent. And so if your tradition teaches jhana, then you do the jhana meditations and do them well. Do them as best you can. If you're doing the Tibetan meditations of Mahamudra, Dzogchen, or whatever, you do that as best you can. And so that's basically how you do it. And so that is the question for today. So now we have come to this, we can start speaking about the text. And so I'll bring that up on the screen now. So here we have the section on explaining holy wanderers. And so this term holy wanderers, I have to be completely honest here, it's kind of a mechanical translation. Well, how are we going to translate these different parts of this word? What does it mean? And it's so when I did it, I kind of followed it a little bit mechanically. What this means really are those people who are going to the better, higher, the more exalted states. And these are states where you can't do anything, where you never do anything wrong. You never have any thought of even doing anything wrong. So this Sanskrit word is sadgati. So it's going to the higher, going to the exalted. So it's people who are kind of going or who are destined for the exalted. There's an interesting, in the Chim Abhidharma, the translation by Ian Coughlin called the Ornament of the Abhidharma, has a nice description of this. And so he uses a different term now. Right now, I can't remember exactly what he said because I've been thinking about other permutations, ways to translate. But so this is what we mean. People, so people who are really going to the to higher or better states. So in the explanation of this, there are 2 points. There's the actual and an elaboration. So the actual reads, without dividing those bound higher, there are 7 holy wanderers. So without dividing those bound higher, I probably should have just gone on yesterday. This would have been much easier if I'd kept on going. Yesterday, we talked about the 9 different types of beings. There are the 9 bound for form. There are those who achieve nirvana in the between state, on birth in the supreme fourth, and the between state, and those who achieve it on birth, and those who achieve it and who are bound for higher. And so those are the 3 types explained on page 463, which you described yesterday. So, and then each of those 3 is divided into 3, those essentially who achieve it quickly in a medium amount of time or in a longer time, those 3. So that's 3 times 3 is 9 different types of people. So when we come to the 7 holy wanderers, it says, they're taught in the sutras. And the question here that comes, it's more clear in the auto commentary. What are these 7 holy wanderers taught in the sutras? Well, the 7 holy wanderers taught in the sutras are the 3 who pass into nirvana in the intermediate. That means those who pass immediately after appearing, being born in the intermediate state. Those who, or bardo state. Those who are born after a little bit of time, those who are born in somewhat more time. Then there are those, then there are the 3 who pass into nirvana on birth. Again, basically how quickly they achieve it. So very quickly, moderately quickly, or somewhat quickly. And then those bound for higher, who are not divided into 3, but just lumped all into 1. So these are the 7 holy wanderers, or the 7 people who are going to the exalted, the greater states. It is proposed. So why are the ones bound for higher not classified into more? We've got 3 of each of the other ones. Why not say 9 holy wanderers, you say? Well, there are different explanations. So Purnavardhana, who wrote a commentary on the treasury of it, on the Abhidharma, he explains that the reason for not dividing those bound for higher is that the classifications are so confusing. As you remember yesterday talk, there are just so many. The reason they're confusing is because there's so many possible permutations. There are too many permutations, so it's just confusing. Then the prince, and that means Yashomitra, or Jinapitra Yashomitra, explains that it depends upon the disciple's interest. So for what you're interested in. So here, why, the question now, the elaboration here is, why are they called holy wanderers, or those who are destined for the higher? So they act on the holy, not on the unholy, or they act on holy, not unholy. They go without return, so holy. So why are only these and not the attached learners, stream enters, and once returners presented as holy wanderers? In other words, all these holy wanderers, they're all non-returners. Why don't we call stream enters and once returners? They're noble beings too. Why aren't they holy wanderers? Well, between the 2 types, holy and unholy beings, that means the holy beings, act only on virtuous holy conduct. Whereas the latter, unholy beings, this really doesn't, the latter do not act on the non-virtuous or unholy. In other words, there's a difference. When you're still attached to the desire realm, then you've still got all the afflictions. And when you have the afflictions, then you can act on them, right? So that's the meaning of holy. So they're also called holy because they go to higher realms without return to either that or lower levels. So there are 2 reasons. They only do holy conduct, not the unholy, and they go without to the higher realms without returning to the desire realm, or if they're already on one of the levels of form, without returning to a lower level. So So that is the meaning of, here it says wander. This is the meaning of someone, maybe it's someone who's destined for the exalted, maybe it might be a better translation, but someone who's going there. So therefore, only the non-returners are holy. So the learners who are stream enterers and once returners. So learners means people who are on the path of meditation, paths of seeing and meditation. So the learner beings include stream enterers and once returners and non-returners. But of those learners, the stream enterers and the once returners, they only act on virtuous holy conduct. That's true. But they are not going to the higher realms and not returning. So therefore, they are not called the holy beings, the holy wanderers. But then you might say, but it says in a sutra, it says here, however, it says in a sutra, what is a holy being, you ask? One who has the correct view of the learners. So this is what the sutra says. So if the sutra says that holy beings are people who have the correct view of the listeners, well, stream enterers have that because they've seen the Four Noble Truths. Once returners, of course, also have it. So why aren't they holy? Well, so the reason is that additionally, attached learners who have taken vows to never do 5 misdeeds and have mostly discarded nutra for which they are qualifiedly holy. So the learners, those who are attached, they're never going to do the misdeeds again. They've mostly discarded non-virtuous actions, and therefore they are holy, but they're not completely holy. They're qualified. So here it's for the unqualifiedly holy, who are not just going to not do any unvirtuous deeds, but they're never going to come back to the desire realm. Then there's another type of noble of non-returner, and these are those nobles whose lives have been completely transformed. So the next section identifies what do we mean by saying nobles whose lives have been completely transformed, and there are 2 points. So the first is the actual. So the actual here reads, those who in desire transform their lives don't go to other realms. So transforming your lives completely means that you achieve nirvana. So those noble beings, in other words, stream enterers or once returners and non-returners, who while they're still in the desire realm achieve nirvana, they're not going to go to any other realm. Why not? Because they have achieved nirvana. Once you've achieved nirvana, you no longer take birth. You live out the rest of your life and then you pass off into cessation. So you might wonder, well, we have so many different types of non-returners. Are there bazillions of types of these nobles who have completely transformed? And the answer is no. Are there such classifications of the nobles whose lives are completely transformed in desire, you ask, it says in the commentary. There are not. Well, so what are they? If there are no classifications, how are they? The nobles who in desire completely transform their lives do not go to other realms, because in that very life they attain the result of non-returner and then completely pass to nirvana, right? So once you've attained the state, so first you go through the states of, you're on the state of either the stream enterer or once returner. You achieve non-returner, and then you do more meditation, you achieve arhat. Then you're never going to pass to another realm. So those whose lives are completely transformed in the form realm can also enter the formless realm, such as those bound for hire that are going to the peak of existence. So, well then it says, a sutra says, Shakra said, if after I die here I am born as a human and attain nirvana, that would be excellent. If I do not attain nirvana, then may I be reborn in below none. Now actually here, there's a slight difference between the quotation here and the quotation that is given in the auto commentary. So in the auto commentary, there's an additional step. So Shakra says, after I die here, I'm born as a human, and then attain nirvana. Then instead of if I do not attain nirvana, then may I be reborn in the below realm. What Shakra said in the suit, according to the Abhidharma, is if I attain nirvana, that would be great. And then after I've attained nirvana, can I be reborn in below none, or the realm of Akanishta? How is it that this could happen? Because he's saying this in a sutra. Well, this is not the Buddha saying it. This is Shakra, or another name for Indra, the king of the gods, or the lord of the gods. So Basically, what this means, the great exposition explanation, is that he just doesn't know what he's talking about. So the great exposition tradition says, Shakra merely does not know the Abhidharma, and the teacher, that is the Buddha, did not refute him in order to please him. You want to keep, when you've got students, you want to keep them happy. And if they say something that's good, but not completely right, you don't always say, you don't always split hairs, you know? And if you'd done that, then Chakra might have been embarrassed or whatever. So better to just make him happy. He wants to achieve nirvana. That's what you want. After he achieves nirvana, he'll understand. Okay. So then the next question is, when we're talking about lives those nobles whose lives are completely transformed, what are those dharmas that are connected with that state of being a noble being whose lives have completely transformed? So here it says, both they and those born higher do not regress or refine faculties. So those non-returners whose lives are completely transformed in desire, as well as those nobles born in the higher realms, have familiarity with the path through continuous lifetimes. In other words, they've been meditating on the path for a long time already, because it takes at least 3 lifetimes to get to that state, right? You've got the lifetime where you start accumulating merit, the lifetime where you go through the path of joining and the path of seeing, and then you have the lifetimes where it takes 3 lifetimes. As said before, the swiftest in 3 lives are freed, right? So you have at least 3 lifetimes. So you've been meditating a lot. And you also have attained superior supports that cannot regress. Your body and your mind have been trained, and so they're better supports. So you won't be able to regress. So for these reasons, they do not regress, and because that in itself fully ripens their faculties, they do not refine faculties. So there are different types of arhats. There are different classifications of being. We've already been through many of the types. We'll go through more types later. But sometimes if you're kind of in the sort of lower categories, you can refine your faculties to get to a higher one. But if you're already in this level of either being a non-returner who's already born in the higher realms, or of being someone who's completely transformed their lives in this realm, you're already at a higher level. Your faculties are already ripened, and so you do not need to refine them, so that you don't refine them. Okay. So the other day when we were speaking, we spoke a little bit about the alternating meditation. When we were speaking about those who are bound for higher, we spoke about how leapers perform the great alternating meditation, or half leapers have a lesser form of the alternating meditation. So what do we mean by the alternating meditation? So here is where this is discussed. So the methods for meditating on the alternation of the dhyanas. So basically what we're talking about is, this is like meditation exercises. It's kind of like doing your scales if you're playing the piano, or practicing chords if you're playing the guitar, whatever. It's kind of like refining your skills, getting to be good, so you can be, like, as I said the other day, the virtuoso. Oops, sorry, I'm hitting the wrong things. So you can kind of be like the virtuoso meditator, to use a terrible example. At any rate, so if you want to do this, then there are the methods for meditating the alternation of dhyanas, and this has 4 points. The first is the alternated dharmas. So what do you alternate? So it says, they alternate the 4th dhyana first. So above this it said, where it says, if they alternate the dhyanas, they are bound for below none, or bound for akanishta. So what is alternated, and what do you alternate first? So what you alternate is, it says, that is, those who are bound for below none, alternate both the defiled and the undefiled 4th dhyana first, because that is the most workable of all levels, and because it is the supreme of the easy paths. So the 4th dhyana is a really very subtle, very powerful meditation. In some ways, it's one of the strongest meditations you can have. on that level, it's easy to work with. There's not a whole lot of effort there. It's easy to work with. And so you're alternating on that level between defiled and undefiled, or undefiled and defiled meditation. So the dhyanas arise in order from the first up. And the one that is first alternated is the fourth. So you first, before you practice the alternating meditation, you have to achieve the fourth dhyana. And as you as you go through to achieve the fourth jhana, then you achieve that, then you can start practicing the alternating meditation. Then later, the third, second, and first are also alternated. So it's easiest to do it on the fourth, and once you can do it on the fourth, then you start doing it on the third, and then on the second, and then on the first. It's harder on the lower levels because the mind is harder. So the support is that at first one can alternate only as a human in one of the three continents. And then later one can alternate in the form realm as well. In other words, you first have to learn how to do it when you're a human in the desire realm. And then later when you're reborn in the desire realm, you will also be able to do the alternating meditation there. So achieved by alternating moments. And so the way you gain it is by alternating moments. So the great expositionists, that's the proponents of the great exposition school, say that right after an undefiled moment, a defiled moment is manifested. And then right after that, the defiled moment, right after that defiled moment, another undefiled moment is manifested. So you've got three moments. First, you have the undefiled moment. Say you're looking at a cognition, an undefiled moment of dhyana that's focusing on the undefiled truth of path or truth of cessation, whatever you're focusing on. That's the first moment. Then in the second moment, you go to look at, you have a defiled meditation, which is, so you go from undefiled to defiled. And then you go from defiled back to undefiled. So maybe you go from looking at I don't know. Well, basically, you go from looking at, so like looking at the Four Noble Truths, knowing the Four Noble Truths in dhyana, looking at something defiled in dhyana, and then going back to looking at the Four Noble Truths or whatever, the undefiled. And so you're going back and forth. So you go from undefiled to defiled, and then back. So it's kind of like the flowers on a garland. So you've got when you go to, those of you who have been to India, you see they sell these big garlands of marigold flowers, and you can get ones where there are just all golden marigolds, and you can sometimes get ones where there are golden and white ones in alternation. So you've got a golden and then a white and a golden. So you've got here with the alternating meditation, you've got the undefiled, defiled, undefiled, the three in order. The undefiled and defiled moments are like the path of no obstacles, and the third undefiled is like the path of liberation, so they say. So they say. So this is another one where Vasubandhu is not entirely in agreement, but he's presenting it. So it's kind of like, on the path of no obstacles, you're looking at on the path of no obstacles, that's the moment where you're actually eliminating the affliction. So there's a little bit, and then you're free and there's relief. So as you're going through, you've got this undefiled, then you skip to defiled, and these are a little bit, effort, and then back to the undefiled, and that's like relief. Okay. So the master says that no one except for the Buddha can alternate three single moments. So the alternation is performed by entering the three equipoises in succession for as long as they wish. So the Buddha can do this in three successive moments. And how fast are moments? Well, if you remember from chapter 3, we're talking about those indivisible moments of time, the shortest possible moments, which are, milliseconds. So a millisecond in one, and an undefiled, a millisecond in, and these aren't necessarily strictly Western milliseconds. I'm just using that. An instant in undefiled, an instant in defiled, an instant in undefiled. Only the Buddha can do that in three successive instants of mind. Everyone else, you have to be in there for a few of those instants. So this would be like a moment, what we call the moment of completing an action. So you rest in the undefiled, maybe half a second, maybe a second, then into defiled for half a second or a second, and then back to defiled. Or maybe you do it for longer according to Vasubandhu, performing the 3 equipoises in succession for as long as they wish. And here I just want to take a little bit of a side track. There's a Theravada presentation of the Abhidharma. The Abhidharma Sangraha, translated by Bhikkhu Bodhi and available as a free download online. If you just type in Abhidharma or the compendium of Abhidharma, it'll come right up. You'll be able to download it on your whatever you just search for it and you'll find it. It's easy to get. Very, very interesting to look through. It's a little bit different than this, this great exposition tradition, but it's also very interesting. And in there, they describe how the Buddha is able to go from moment to moment to moment to moment. And when we talk about they describe how the Buddha actually used this technique in order to produce the famed miracles that he did at Jatavana Grove. It's going back and forth between defiled and undefiled, and then also skipping levels so incredibly rapidly that it caused all the miracles to happen. So this is another reason why, this is something else that you can kind of gain as you get mastery over these levels. But it's just kind of an interesting sidetrack. So if you are interested, you may look for that. Now, so what is the reason for doing this alternating meditation? I mean, I kind of presented it as like practicing scales on a piano. Well, that's actually not you don't do it just for the sake of doing it. The reason that you perform the alternating meditation is described in the next verse. And what it says, one moment, please. So what the verse says, in order to take birth and dwell also from fear of the affliction. So there are 3 reasons. So in order to take birth in the pure abodes, because the cause for there are the 5 pure of the 17 abodes in the form realm. There are the 5 pure abodes, and they're achieved by learning how to do the alternating meditation. So that's the first reason. And then dwelling in bliss in the visible, that means being comfortable in this lifetime because you have more control over meditation. You'll be able to remain in bliss or comfort in this lifetime. And then also from fear of the affliction. So those are 3 reasons. So the commentary reads, what is the purpose of alternating dhyana? Why would you do this? It's not just an exercise. Non-returners with sharp faculties alternate in order to not pass into nirvana here, but to take birth in the pure abodes and to dwell in the bliss in the visible. So to take rebirth in one of the 5 pure realms, any of the realms from not great all the way up to below none, those 5 realms, or and also to dwell in bliss in the visible, to be comfortable and blissful in this lifetime. Those are 2 reasons for the sharp faculties. Those with dull faculties also meditate from fear of the afflictions. Because when you're doing this, they're keeping themselves from regressing. So as it says, in order to keep from regressing from the result by distancing themselves from the samadhi that is concurrent with enjoyment. So what can happen if you have dull faculties is that you can get a little bit attached to your meditation. You can say, oh, this 4th jhana is just sublime. I like it so much. It's just lovely. That's attachment. And when you have that attachment then causes you to, can cause you to regress from your result, which you don't want to do. So in order to avoid that happening, you do your exercises. It's kind of like, if you exercise and everything so that you can run a marathon, and then you get kind of like, I can run a marathon, and you stop practicing, you're no longer able to do it. It's the same thing here. If you want to be able to keep yourself in peak meditation shape, shall we say. You need to be able to keep doing these meditations. But really, it's in order to avoid that attachment. It's a technique to improve your meditation so that you will not cling to it. So those non-returners with dull factors here alternate for all three reasons. That is, in order to take birth in the pure abodes, in order to abide in bliss in the visible, and from fear of regression. But the sharp for the former two, that means in order to take birth and in order to dwell in bliss in the visible. And then with arhats, they also practice this meditation, but they do it for the latter two reasons. In other words, if they're dull arhats, they do it for the latter two reasons, which are in order to dwell in bliss in the visible and from fear of regression. And sharp arhats for only the second reason. Because the arhats with sharp faculties aren't going to regress. So they aren't worried about that, but they do want to abide in bliss in this life, so they practice the alternating meditation. The reason they're not going to be reborn in the pure abodes is because they don't want to take rebirth in the pure abodes, is because they're already free of attachment to all of samsara. They're not going to take rebirth in samsara. So now the reason why these dhyanas are these alternating dhyanas is the cause for rebirth in the pure abodes, and they're the 5 pure abodes. So why is it that there are 5 pure abodes? It's because there are only 5 types of that. So the next topic says the cause for the pure realms being definitely 5. So the reason why we're limited to 5 pure abodes as opposed to 10 or 15, or in the Mahayana we have infinite ones. So how does that happen? Well, it says, because there are 5 types of that, only 5 births in pure abodes. So there are 5 types of the alternating meditation. So for that reason, there are the 5 pure abodes. So why are there only 5 births in the pure abodes, you ask? It is because there are 5 types of that alternating meditation. So then the first is the lesser alternating meditation. There's 1 defiled between 2 undefiled moments. So 3 minds. You've got 1 moment of dhyana, 1 moment of undefiled dhyana, 1 moment of defiled dhyana, and then 1 moment of undefiled dhyana. 3 moments. You do that once. That's the lesser alternating meditation. In the middle, it's doubled for 6 minds. So undefiled, defiled, undefiled, undefiled, defiled, undefiled for 2 sets. So that is 6. In the greater, it is tripled for 9 alternations. And in the very great, so this is the 4th level, the very great is you do 4 times, and so that's 12 alternations or 12 moments. And in the extremely great, there are 15, so 5 sets of 3. So because these are kind of like the 5 sets, there are only 5 births in the pure abodes from not great to below none out of the power of the defiled aspect. So these are the 5 pure abodes from not great and so forth up to the below none or akanishta. So those are the alternating meditations. Now we also have among the non-returners, they practice different types of absorptions. And one of the absorptions they practice is called the absorption of cessation. The absorption of cessation is a meditation practiced by noble beings that basically mind and mental factors cease. That's why it's called cessation. So the non-returners who practice that are called by a special name. And so here the topic is explanation of those made manifest by body. As it says in the root text, non-returners who have gained cessation are called made manifest by body. So the explanation reads, those non-returners who have gained the absorption of cessation are explained in the sutras as being called made manifest by body. It is proposed. Again, this is kind of a little bit of a, this is a great exposition position. So the reason that it's called made manifest for the, by body is because, like liberation, the peace of cessation arises on the support of a body with no mind. The great exposition explains. In other words, the absorption of cessation is a very peaceful meditation that is similar to liberation. So you enter this meditation, you're sitting in it, and as you are in the meditation, there's no mind. There are no mental factors. They're just not arising. They're not occurring. So the meditation at that point is supported by the body. So it's the cessation of the mind and mental factors. As it explains in the Abhidharma, in the auto commentary, when you arise from this, you have the feeling like, oh, this peace of resting in the absorption of cessation is very much like the peace of nirvana. So it's called peaceful. And that's why it's said to be like liberation, or like liberation here meaning nirvana. So, and this happens on the support of a body with no mind. So because there's no mind, it's made manifest by body. Now, the master of Vasubandhu has a slightly different take on it. He says, the master states that there is mind at the times when one arises from or enters the absorption of sensation. In other words, what you have is you are doing your dhyana meditations and you decide, I want to enter the absorption of cessation. And then, so there's the moment where you actually enter it. At that moment, there is mind. And it ceases. Once it has ceased, then you dwell in cessation as long as you're going to dwell in cessation. Then at some point you arise from cessation. And in that moment that you arise from cessation, there is another moment of mind. So basically he's quibbling. He's like saying, okay, the first and last moments, there's mind. Everything else, there's no mind. That's what he's saying. So this practice of the absorption of cessation is practiced. It's practiced by people who practice the sutra path, where the mind and mental factors completely cease. It's done by noble beings only, and it will be discussed later in the 8th chapter. Okay, so now we have finished the discussion of the third of the 4 results, the section on the non-returners. So now we have the section on the arhats, and there are 2 parts on it. There's the entering the arhat, and then abiding, there are 3 topics: entering the arhat, abiding in result, and the classification of arhat enterers and abiders. How do you classify them? Do they have as many classifications as the non-returners, or are they not classified? That's the 3rd topic. But first, we'll talk about entering. So remember, we have for each of the 4 types of results, you've got entering and abiding in the results. So entering means those people who are working at achieving it. So entering here says they are entering arhat until the peak's 8th blockage is extinguished, and on the 9th path of no obstacles. That is the Vajra-like samadhi. So basically, this is saying that once you have achieved the state of non-returner and have started discarding the discards of meditation of the higher realms, from that time on until you achieve the Vajra-like samadhi, you are entering arhat. So it's until the peak's 8th blockage. So the first 2 lines, they're entering arhat until the peak's 8th blockage is extinguished. That means the 8th set of discards on the peak of meditation. So basically, any time between the time when they have discarded the first set of discards of the first level of dhyana, all the way up to the 8th discard. 8th discard. And then on the 9th discard, the discarding that has the 2 parts. There's the path of no obstacles and the path of liberation. So you're still entering on the path of no obstacles, but when you've achieved the path of liberation, then you are actually abiding in arhat. And that path of no obstacles that eliminates the last set of afflictions that bind you to the peak, that is called the Vajra-like samadhi. So to read the commentary here, They, that is, non-returners, are in the state of entering Arhat from the time of abandoning the first dhyana's greater discards until the peak of existence, eighth block, which is extinguished, or that is abandoned. So basically, maybe I should have done a picture of this, but there are only so many pictures you can make. It takes a lot of time to make them. So basically, you've got the 9 sets of 9 for the levels of form, or maybe I can just show a picture from the other day. One moment. Oh, let's see what I've got. Oh, yeah. What have I got? What day did I talk about those? This was the one, I think. So I have to exit that. Oh, yeah. Where is this? Okay. If I had planned things better, yes, this morning. Okay. So here we have the 9 discards. And this is for a non-returner, right? A non-returner is once you achieve non-returner when you have eliminated all the discards of desire. Well, if you have eliminated also, and I don't know if you can see my pointer on the screen, but there's this first discard of dhyana. If you eliminate that, then from the time of the second discard of the first dhyana until you go all the way to the 8th discard of the peak of existence, in other words, for these 79 discards, when you're in the process of eliminating those 79, then you are called entering the state of Arhat. Then when you get to the last one, the path of no obstacles, the moment the wisdom first arises, that is still entering Arhat. And but then the moment that it's arisen, the affliction is gone, and you know it, then you are abiding in the result. So that is the way it works. You've got those 79. As you're going through the process of eliminating those 79, then you are abiding in the, what do we say? Then you are entering the state of Arhat. So, those, let's see, I read up through the path of the 9th obstacles, path of no obstacles that abandon it are also enterers. So you've got people abandoning those first 79 and people who are abandoning who are in the process of abandoning the 9th. That path of no obstacles is the Vajra-like samadhi. The reason it's called a Vajra-like samadhi is because it's like a diamond Vajra. It cannot be broken. It is the greatest of all paths of no obstacles, so it has the power to dispel all of the kernels. Once you have that diamond-like or that Vajra-like samadhi, it's indestructible. Nothing can stop it, so it can remove all of the discards of meditation. So here, this term, the Vajra-like samadhi, is probably familiar to people who have studied. When you read about the Mahayana too, you also hear about the Vajra-like samadhi in the Mahayana as well. So basically, it means the last moment before you achieve the final result, which in the Great Exposition would be the result of an Arhat. In the Mahayana, it's the result of a Buddha. So that's the difference there. Just a question of which result you're talking about. But either, and of course, then the nature of that samadhi is presented differently in the Mahayana as opposed to the foundation vehicle. But basically, when you hear Vajra-like samadhi, you mean that samadhi that you're in the moment that you achieve Buddhahood or Arhatship. Okay. So that was the description of entering the state of Arhats. And so now we have the section on the section on abiding in result. And so this has 2 topics, the actual and supplementary topics. So attaining its extinction and knowing thereof, non-learner Arhat. So someone who has attained its, that is the 9th discard of the level of peak, who's attained the extinction of that or abandoned that, and knows that, is a non-learner Arhat. So when you get to the stage of an arhat, there's nothing more to learn, so you're called a non-learner. On the paths of seeing and meditation, you're learning still, so you're a learner. When you're on the path of, when you're an arhat, there's nothing left to learn, so you're a non-learner arhat. So when a noble has attained its, or the ninth, extinction or abandonment, and the simultaneously arising knowing thereof, so when you have abandoned the last of the discards of meditation, the ninth of the ninth discard of meditation of the level of the peak, and you know that. That is knowing extinction. That is the path of liberation. So the path of liberation is what arises the moment after the path of no obstacles. Then you're called non-learner because there's no more learning for the purpose of another result. You've reached the final result. So for that reason, they have attained the ultimate benefit for themselves, so they're capable of performing benefit for others. That's one reason why they're called arhats. They're worthy of, an arhat is someone who is worthy of respect. It's often, in Tibetan, they translated it as a foe destroyer, someone who's destroyed all the foes, but it also can mean someone who deserves respect. Why do they deserve respect? Because they have reached the state where they have nothing more to learn, so they can teach us. So that's one reason that they can be respected. And so therefore they are worthy of respect from all ordinary individuals and from attached learners. Not only does it ordinary people such as ourselves, or myself at least, but also people who are on the path. The stream enterers and the once returners and non-returners all also can pay them respect. So they are arhats. Now there are supplementary topics here. And so here's the question, well, how do you eliminate your attachments? Analyzing methods, so there are two topics, supplementary topics have analyzing the methods of detachment from desire and explaining the results of the spiritual way. So there are these two things. So the analyzing methods of detaching of desire has four topics, which is first of all an overview of detachment. So detachment from desire means attachment from desire for the desire realm or for the desire of the higher realms. So there's an overview of that detachment and how the attainment of removal arises, which levels of discard attachment, and analyzing the focus and aspects of the past. So the first of these is an overview of detachment from desire. So, desire here is the lower D desire, not the upper D. Uppercase D. It's not the desire realm. It is desire as an attachment to any of the realms of any of the three realms of existence. So, the transworldly being's detachment from the peak. Two kinds detach from others. When you have the discards of meditation from the peak of existence, the fourth level of the fourth of formless realms, then the transworldly or the noble, that is the specifically Buddhist meditation, brings detachment from those. Two kinds detach from others. So for all the other realms, you can achieve detachment from them, either through the worldly meditations, that's like the Hindu jhanas, or from the noble meditations. Either one works. So as it says, when it says the path of meditation is twofold, right? We've got worldly and transworldly, or supramundane, other people translate. I don't know, both are horrible words. Which learner path just detaches one from the desire of which levels, you say? Only the transworldly path, that is, only the noble Buddhist transcendent path brings detachment from the peak of existence. The worldly paths cannot, for there's nothing worldly above that, and because they are not antidotes for their own levels. The reason why they're not antidotes for their own levels is because they are still attached to their own levels. You still have desire. When you are on the peak of existence, you still have the attachment for peak of existence. So that your meditation on the peak of existence helps the afflictions of the peak of existence develop. Therefore, it cannot be its antidote. It can't be its own antidote. In other words, the worldly meditations cannot be the antidote for their own levels. But both of the two kinds of paths, that is the worldly and the transworldly or transcendent, the worldly paths are the preparation for higher levels. That means the specific preparations you do to achieve, the preparatory meditations you do to achieve the higher levels, and the transworldly path, the noble path, can detachment for the levels other than the peak of existence. That's for the desire up to the third formless realm. So then there's the question of the attainment of removal. So you've removed the, when you remove an obstacle, then you attain the removal, according to the Great Exposition. There is that separate quality, which is, or that separate dharma, which is attainment. So, according to the Great Exposition. So this has two topics, the worldly and the transworldly. So the nobles detached through worldly paths attain a removal that is twofold. In other words, if you follow, if you are a noble being and you have achieved detachment or have achieved or are achieving detachment through the worldly paths, through like the yoga traditions, dhyana meditation, for example, then you have a twofold removal. You have the removal by doing it through the noble path or through the worldly path. And then also when you gain the status of becoming a noble, then you also gain a noble detachment at the same time, which is a little bit different. There are different attachments because the way you remove the afflictions is different. Essentially, with the worldly paths, you're just squelching them so that they have no hope of getting out, of arising. With the noble paths, you're just uprooting them entirely. And so that's different. So you have the twofold attachment, or a twofold attainment of removal. So, well, then what is the distinction between the removal caused by those two paths, you ask? The noble stream enters who practice shamatha, for example, and become detached through worldly paths, attain removal that is twofold. The attainment of both worldly and transworldly or transcendent removal arises. So they have both of these types occur. Now, then there's the transworldly, or the transcendent maybe is a better word. They have 2 points. And this is first is presenting others' propositions. So what the other people say, some say through the transworldly too, since this they forfeit no afflictions. So you can all, so some people say that when you use the noble or transcendent meditation, you can also achieve a twofold attainment, or gain two attainments for that, because you gain it once. And then if you forfeit these when you say go to a higher level or consolidate results or whatever, or change your, refine your faculties, then you also gain another attainment at that point too. So some schools say that there can be double attainment through the transworldly paths too. Because if a non-returner who has been detached only through the distinctive undefiled path from all levels up to nothingness, then refines their faculties, then at that point they are forfeiting the previous path of the dull, and they achieve the mirror result of the sharp. The distinctive path is the path where you're on it, but you're trying to improve yourself, improve your level, refine your faculties. So they give that up and they achieve the mirror result of the sharp faculties, but they have none of the higher levels of fiction. So therefore they must have the new attainment, they say. And then the refuting them, the Great Exposition or the Vasubandhu's position is that as when one's freed from half the peaks or born above, they're not possessed. They do not, at that point, it's well, to read the commentary, the master says that although such non-returners do not have the attainment of worldly removal, they do not have those levels of affliction. So for example, so when they have refined their faculties, they haven't got the worldly attachment of it, but they also do not have the afflictions. And because they didn't have the afflictions, therefore they can't get another attainment of abandoning them. So for example, it is just as when one has no worldly attachment of freedom from half of the peaks of existence afflictions. If one forfeits the transworldly paths by refining faculties, those afflictions are still not possessed. Or, for example, when an ordinary individual is born above in the level of the first dhyana or higher, they forfeit the attainment of removal of afflictions of desire, but do not possess them. So basically, if you, because they're not newly, there's no difference in the in what they're gaining, then they do not gain a twofold attainment. So thus, the opponent's position is not convincing. Therefore, since those non-returners do not possess of the afflictions, since there's no, since there's their non-attainment. They don't have the afflictions because they have the non-attainment, which means the non-position, not having them. This was discussed, something we discussed in when we discussed the in the second chapter. Okay. So now there is a question: what levels of discard the attachment? When do you? What level of meditation do you have to be on to discard attachment? So there are 2 points here. First is the level of not unable, and then there are the other 8 levels. So we've got 9 levels of equipoise, give or take. There's the not unable, which is the preparations for the first dhyana, the undefiled, the preparations for the first dhyana. And then also there are the 4 levels of form and the 3 levels of formless, and also the special dhyana. So this, so for the description of not unable, there are 2 points. The actual is undefiled not unable can remove attachment to all levels. So which levels can detach one from the desire for which levels, you ask? The undefiled preparations for the first dhyana, not unable, can remove attachment to all the higher and lower levels from desire to the peak of existence. So this is because the preparations for the first dhyana are different than the other preparations. They can be either defiled or undefiled. For the other realms, the preparations are all definitely defiled. So they can only detach you from the discard of one of the desire of the lower realms. So for example, if you are on the level of the first dhyana and you want to achieve the second dhyana by doing the worldly path, then you enter the preparations for the second dhyana. And the preparations for the second dhyana can only eliminate the afflictions of the first dhyana. But if you are on the first dhyana and you are in a noble meditation on the first dhyana, then you can eliminate more afflictions. So, dispelling a doubt about its freedom. So, in victory over the 3 levels, the final path of liberation comes out of dhyana or preparation, above, not from the preparations. So in the victory over 3 levels, these are, that means the freeing from oneself from attachment from the levels of desire, form, for the first level of formless, and the second dhyana. You can do this either out of the meditation of dhyana or out of the preparations. But when you're above, when you're achieving the final victory, in other words, when you're eliminating them totally, not just squelching them, but eliminating them totally, then you can also do this. You do this not from the preparations, but only from the dhyanas. So do all the paths of liberation arise out of the preparations, like the path of no obstacles? They do not. Well, how is it, you ask? In victory over the 3 levels of desire in the first 2 dhyanas, the faculties are sharp. You can switch feelings. So the preparations and the actual dhyanas have different feelings. The preparations are neutral, but the first dhyana and the second dhyana and the third dhyana all have feelings of various types of pleasure. And so if your faculties are sharp, then you can switch the feelings from the neutral to the feeling of either pleasure, mental pleasure, or cognitive pleasure. And so there's little affection for the preparations. And so therefore the dhyana, or the essence of the actual, arises. So the final path of liberation thus comes out of the dhyana, or the actual practice. Or if your faculties are dull, you cannot switch feelings, so the final path of liberation then comes from the essence of the preparations. So if your faculties are dull, you can't do that, so you have to do it on the level of preparations. But when you're achieving the victory over the higher levels of the third dhyana or above, that is the victory on the noble paths, the preparations and the actual practices on the fourth and so forth have compatible feelings. In other words, they're all neutral. The preparations are neutral, and the actual meditation is neutral, so it's easier to switch between the two. And so therefore, because of that, and because there is respect for the actual practice, the path of liberation is not born from the last preparations, but from the essence of the actual practice. So then there are the other 8 levels. 8 nobles are victorious over their own and higher levels. So there are 8 noble or undefiled absorptions. That is the ones, in addition to the not enable, there are 8 more. And these are victorious over their own level or over the higher level. In other words, you can achieve the liberation from, you can achieve the state of Arhat in any of these absorptions. So the 8 noble or undefiled absorptions, the 4 actual, special samadhi, and the first 3 formless. So you've got the 4 actual dhyana, the first, second, third, and fourth dhyana, plus the special, and then the first 3 formless are victorious over their own and higher levels and remove desire for those levels. So they remove for their own level or higher levels, but not for lower levels. So why not the lower levels? They do not detach you from the lower levels, because if you're not detached, you cannot master it already. You've already eliminated it. And so if you're not already detached, you can't manifest the actual practice. So you have to always be eliminated. Someone is already detached from the lower levels. That's why it's not that it couldn't, it's just that there's no need. Well, I guess that's why it can't, because there are no afflictions. You can't abandon an affliction that's already gone. So now looking at the aspects of the paths, the focus and the aspects, so what they're observing and the aspects, what they're looking at. So this has 2 points. There's the actual. The worldly paths of liberation and of no obstacles have peace and course, etc., as their aspects, and as their sphere, the high and low. So the focus means what they're looking at. The aspects means how they're seeing it, how it appears to them. The aspect is as described later on the text. It's like a type of prajna, how you're discerning it. So when you're on the path of liberation, that means when you've already become detached. And on no obstacles, that's when you are doing the abandoning. So the path of liberation is looking at what is it looking at? It is looking at the higher level. Say, for example, you are you're on the preparations for the first level of dhyana, for the first dhyana. You're on those. You do the preparations and you are on the path. Then you achieve the path of no obstacles, where you are at that moment abandoning the obstacles of the desire, the last afflictions of the desire realm. At that point, what are you looking at? You're looking at the afflictions of the desire realm. In the second moment, the next moment after that, is the path of liberation. There's no afflictions of desire to look at. You're looking at the higher realm. So it's the path of liberation is looking at peace, right? It's seeing the first dhyana as being peaceful in comparison to the desire realm. And it's looking at the higher realm. The path of no obstacles is still looking at the desire realm, so it's looking at the lower, and it's seeing it as coarse, as being kind of rough in comparison to the first jhana. So the commentary reads, well then, if the transcendent paths of no obstacles and liberation have the truths as their focus and also have their aspects, well, what do the worldly paths have? So we already have talked about, you're focusing on the 4 noble truths and the 16 aspects. So in the worldly paths, what do you focus on? What are the aspects? The worldly paths of liberation and of no obstacles have peace, etc., that is sublimity and emancipation as aspects. They're looking at the higher realm and seeing it as like peaceful, sublime, emancipation. I'm freed from the desire realm. I've achieved the first jhana. And the course, the path of no obstacles, looking at the last of the afflictions and seeing it as being like coarse, like rigidity and thick walls, like confining, stopping you, as their aspects respectively. And as their sphere, the paths of liberations focus on the higher levels and the paths of no obstacles on the lower levels. So what arises immediately following the knowing of extinction when you know that you have extinguished it? So this is all primarily talking about noble individuals. So the previous stanza was talking about worldly paths. Here we're talking about the noble paths. From knowing extinction comes the non-arising intelligence if they're unshakable. If not, the knowing extinction or the view of the non-learner, which all arhats have. So there are different types of arhats. And one of them is called the unshakable. Unshakable means they won't regress. They can't be shaken. They won't be budged. They can't be budged. So what cognitions can arise immediately after knowing extinction? You know that you're an arhat, you know that all the afflictions have been abandoned. So what do you know? You know the extinction or cessation of the arhats. So from knowing extinction comes the non-arising intelligence. In other words, you know that the afflictions are never going to arise again. If they, that is the arhats, are unshakable ones who will not regress. But if they're not unshakable, in other words, if they're one who's definitely going to regress, then the only thing they have at that time is knowing the extinction or the correct view of the non-learner arise from the knowing extinction. They don't have the non-arising intelligence, the knowledge that the afflictions will not arise, because they may well arise for these arhats. So as there is no regressing from knowing non-arising, that knowing does not arise in those who are not unshakable. So if you're not unshakable, you're probably going to, there's a danger you're going to regress. So you do not have that knowledge of non-arising. That correct view of the non-learner is something which all arhats have. That correct view of the knowing extinction, all arhats have that. For even the unshakable, sometimes only the knowing of non-arising, sometimes only the knowing of non-arising arises from the knowing of non-arising. And sometimes the non-learner's correct view also arises. So they have these two that arise. So these are the different distinctions of the non-learners. So I think this is our stopping place for today. We'll be speaking about these results of the spiritual way tomorrow. So we will now, that's all. Looks like I have a question here. Okay, so the question is, once the afflictions are discarded, do they not return? Okay, so this is the question. When the afflictions are discarded, there are two basic ways that you discard afflictions. There is the worldly path, and there is the noble path, or the undefiled path. So the worldly path squelches them. They're not going to come back for a long time. They're squelched. They're just not going to happen. And you achieve the higher realms. But it's like their seeds are still there. They're like the seeds or the spores or something is still there. They're going to come back at some point. It might not be for a very long time, but they're going to come back. That's the worldly path. With the noble path, the afflictions are completely uprooted. It's like they're totally taken out so that they can't arise again. So once you have abandoned an affliction through the noble path, you're never going to have that problem again. So that's the benefit of the noble path over the worldly path. This is why the worldly path is considered temporary. Seems like a long-lasting from our perspective as ordinary individuals, but from the perspective of a noble being, I mean, a lifetime of eons in the form realm is still short compared to infinite samsara. Endless samsara. And so that is not seen as a desirable result. So you want to uproot them entirely, and that involves seeing the path of seeing the nature of the truths and meditating on that discards them entirely. So for most Buddhist schools, once the nobles have uprooted afflictions, they will never arise again. This is the position in the Mahayana. It's the position that most of the Tibetan traditions take. The Great Exposition explains it a little bit differently, though. And they say that you can possibly regress. We've been talking a lot about regressing, mentioning the world, and that this discussion will come up again in a few days. So regressing basically means that at some point your mindfulness might just weaken a little bit and a little bit of attachment might creep back in. And if that happens, then, according to the Great Exposition, you've regressed. But you can easily restore the result. This can only happen with discards of meditation. It does not happen with discards of seeing. So once you have achieved, even if you've achieved one of these lesser states of arhatship where you possibly might regress, you can't regress from a stream enter. Once you are noble, you're noble. You're never going to have to worry about that again. And so you don't have to worry about becoming a worldly being. The other thing is that once you've regressed, you'll definitely restore it before you pass away. So there is no danger that you would have to if you regress from arhatship, it's temporary. It's like a day or two, maybe even less than that, and then you restore it before you pass away. So it's like a kind of a temporary blemish or blip. This is a particular position of the great exposition, and not all schools accept that there's regression. The Sutra school does not accept that there's regression. The Tibetan, most of the Mahayana schools do not really accept regression either. But here, since the text we're speaking about is based on the great exposition school, that's the explanation that's given. In general, though, when you have the general teaching, though, is when you have eliminated an affliction through the noble paths, it is uprooted from its root. You have taken it out entirely. It cannot re-arise. Okay. And let me just check whether we have, that seems to be it for the questions today. So we will now recite the dedication prayers. So please think to yourselves that by the merit of us teaching and listening to the Dharma today, may that represent all the merit that any sentient being has ever done or will ever do. And let's dedicate it all so that all sentient beings may achieve the state of true and lasting liberation from samsara, and so that they can benefit themselves and others. And with this thought, please recite these prayers. O sanam de tam je se pani tobne ye peranam pam chete Jegana chi balong chubai Sibe tolero kunyoro sho. By this merit may we attain omniscience, defeat the enemy, wrongdoing and free, all beings swiftly from the ocean of existence, churned by great waves of birth, age, sickness, and death. Chancho sencho rimpoche make panam ke juraji ke ba nyamba me barya gonde gonde pelwar sho. May bodhicitta great and precious arise in those who have not roused it, never weakening in those who have. May it grow ever stronger and stronger. Okay, thank you very much. And we'll see you tomorrow.